episode, Murder by the Numbers.
Hey, did you know that you could help support our future projects and let everyone know you're a fan of what we do? Check out our print-on-demand store. We have a tab here on YouTube. When you click on it, you can choose from a bunch of different items. We have shirts and posters and coffee mugs. Click on the one you like. When you find the design you want to put on it, choose a color and a size if it's appropriate. And when you purchase these items, a portion goes to help fund our future projects. We really do appreciate your support. You get some cool stuff. When you get that stuff, post pictures here and on other platforms, and we'll hook you up next time you order from our Gear website store. Thank you for your support of gunwebsites.com.
At Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to an extra special edition of, I'm going to cram another 3D Bayonet out real quick, hopefully. And let's see what we got. So we got a poll going. Oh, I guess I'm going to bring out Sharon. So welcome everybody joining us live. You're voting in a poll. No, Kingpin didn't show up. This isn't Kingpin's show though. So I'm going to open up screen sharing here. Come on, Sharon, excuse me. Only got one job, lady. Boom. There we go. And then I'll just hide behind her. And there we go. Here's the deal. We got a poll going. Right now, it's neck and neck. So I don't know. It's like more than 2 people watching. There's 5 people watching. We could have 5 votes out there. Instead, we got 2 votes. So you're going to decide what we're going to draw, and then we're going to render in 3 dimensions what you decide. I only got like an hour, so hurry up. You're making my dog snort. She snorts when people aren't decisive enough in the polls. I'll just make up my own mind here in a second. I don't really want to do VZ58 because of somebody else already did one up there. It's a boring bayonet, kinda, but it does need to be done. And I have made a couple of them off of somebody else's design, but I do need to make my own design. So to me, it's a task. It's a chore. Gunfacts.info? I don't think so. All right, so I'll take a look at that in a bit maybe, but right now I only got like an hour, so I'm going to jump in and work on a bayonet. And KM87 is going to be a tough one, but it is one that people will want to see because it's one of the more rare, difficult to find, expensive bayonets. So the most boring one I don't like, or one of the most boring ones I don't like, or one of the more cooler ones, it's super cool. Let's go with the super cool one. That's super cool. So we're going to first insert the canvas from the computer. Got a bunch of pictures here that have been illustrating. This is the one we're talking about, but I should have a version of it that is raw without any kind of logoing. I voted for the KM87. Right on. Do you know which one we're talking about here? Or are you voting because it has a cool name? Or because of the date? Or for some other reason? We got to vote for the AK-47, which is one I still do need to do. And then I got to decide if I'm going to do spikes. I mean, I probably should, but I don't know how well they're going to 3D print, I guess. All right, so let's see if I can remember how to move around. Yep, there we go. So This is a weird one because we're looking at this side of the blade, and that does matter on this one. There's a different thing on this side of the blade. So these definitely look different on both sides, and I haven't been incorporating that in my 3D files, so whatever. So now we're going to go make this a little bit bigger, I guess, and then say, okay, that's fine. So it's on the origin. See that origin point right in the center there? So that's good to go. Now we're just going to start drawing some stuff around. Now, people have told me to do this in a different way. So I'm going to try doing it. And see, the problem is if I do it as a mesh, it lets me warp it around and fiddle with it and dork around all over it. But then I got to change it into a thing anyway, a solid anyway, I think. So I'm just going to do it the way I know how to do it. And then maybe somebody knows what they're doing with this stuff can do some kind of tutorial or join me for a chat and we can talk about the techniques. But for now, I am, again, going back and forth between Adobe and this stuff is difficult for me. I have to, actually, I'm not doing anything right now. So I don't know if it's the AI picking it up or I'm just that good at it now. But, oh, I spoke too soon. But up until then, it was just basically doing what I kind of wanted. So that was kind of cool. So now I'm going to start it again over here. It also helps if I don't have my one hand on the keypad thing of the laptop, because I think that's messing with my situation over here. Well, here's the deal. I'm going to try not to say nothing and jinx nothing, but for whatever reason, maybe the AI decided, oh, I'm not going to fight this guy today. Maybe it's because my computer's not so laggy. I don't know. But the moon's aligned, and that happened. I'm going to just go ahead and say relatively quickly and easily. And that looks pretty dang good. I'm keeping it. So you just seen that happen. So now we're going to go over here and make yet another area of place. See, I got my hand on the thing and it screwed it up. So try going back a couple. There we go. I'm not really reading the comments. What I'll need to do here next time I come up for air is I will, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's doing exactly what I wanted to do. I'm going to squish over the screen a little bit, and then I'll just put the comments up next to this. So here's the deal. A lot of people out there like to swear what we're doing, and they can do that with Super Chat if they feel like it. And if they do, then we say thanks to that. And at the end of the week, we're going to do some kind of deal where we say thanks by giving away some free stuff at the end of the week to the people who Super Chatted. So, of course, there's no obligation, but anybody who does, it's appreciated. And will be recognized with free loot from our store. Okay, I think. Oh, see, I'm on a transform handle. I thought I was on a point. I don't care. It still did what I kind of wanted. This one's going to be a little bit more curvy and wurvy, but you know what? That's going to happen sometimes. All right, we're going to come down here. Mainly, I got to make sure I get this thing in a whatever it's called, a container, self-contained area. Good. I did, and I did. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll just move this over. Normally, I use the extent of my wide monitor, but I'll use just a portion of it so we can see what's happening over here. Chris is out there. Good afternoon. Looking forward to your show. To Wednesday. The little ruler and protractor. Yeah, exactly. On the other side. Right on. Yeah, I like to share mainly so that I can also, I got two things. One is share how simple it is, relatively simple it is. And trust me, it's not expensive because I'm doing this for the free. It's absolutely free, actually. So this software called Fusion 360 is super good software. It's very good software, and they let you use it for free until you get to, I mean, it's substantial. It's something like $100,000 a year that you make from it, and then they'd like you to pay for it. So it's a cool deal where they let you really use it and get the hang of it, and then if you get successful enough that you're making money with it, then you pay them back. So it's kind of a cool, at least that's how I understand it, and that's how a lot of people have used it. So anyhow, it's super cool software, and if anybody's ever used it or whatever, it's just one of many. Oh man, I'm going to call it a 3D software because I don't know what else to call it. But there's other ones. Like there's people, let's call them the Linux crowd. They'll use other software just because they never like to do whatever people do. They'll always do something different. So there's some other softwares you can use, and some of it's open source and some of it's really good. And I just didn't use it because I was told about this, and I had used this back in the day for school, and then I think a couple of friends had it, and then maybe even clients used it. So I've never been scared of it, so I've used it a few times. So using it now is just kind of the same stuff as before, but better. And I still don't know all these fancy techniques or whatever, but part of the reason to do these projects is to figure them out and learn them. And anyway, since I had about an hour here before I have to do some more stuff, I figured I'm trying to get more use out of these illustrations I made of the bayonets. And one thing to do is use them as a template, essentially, to make these 3Ds. All right, so we got to scroll. Oh, no, I don't. See, I got to start saying this faster. We have a scroll going at the bottom of the screen. We want to thank our Patreons, people that subscribe to our projects that make it possible for me to do this instead of trying to, record a video that makes you buy something. I do appreciate the ability to do this kind of stuff. These bayonet models don't need to exist. Like, they're not going to accomplish anything, but they're giving me the ability to learn the software, and I think they're cool. So we'll have some of these things on the planet now. So why isn't it letting me? Oh, I didn't put the surface. Probably if I quit talking all the time, I'd probably get less mixed up in the middle of it, but whatever. The other day during the evening, I had a deal where if somebody wanted to jump in, I threw out links, but nobody did. So I didn't even bother with that today. But if I should have, then let me know, and I can do that differently. I really only wanted to make 4 of these bayonets, but the KM87 is kind of a special bayonet, and if I'm going to make 5, this will be one of them. So I might as well just make 5. You know what I mean? Come on, why is this thing being? Before I was saying how good it is, now it's fighting me like it did before. So sometimes the AI goes, oh, he's trying to trace that drawing right underneath, obviously, so let me just help him. Today, the AI is like, oh, I don't know what you want, so I'm not doing anything. At least I got what I needed out of it. Now I have to go edit it for like an hour, though. That's the problem. Anyway, so if you're interested in joining for one of these kind of sessions, I think I have like a couple more. I mean, I'll make them. If people end up, I'll put them up at the shop, the ones I print out. And then I'll have the file for anybody who's got a printer and wants to print them. I'll tell you what, right now they take about an hour to print. And I figured out to print them like a tower where they sit on their butt and print up into the air with the point sticking up. And, knock on wood, that's been printing pretty decent. So I think it's a pretty, as far as the prints I've personally made, it's one that's the easiest to fiddle with or to print. It's just there's nothing to deal with. It just prints good, and then you get a good result because it's easy to print a boring thing that'll print good. This is something that's a little bit more interesting. A little bit more interesting than the boring stuff. Now, how do I make it go backwards? Here it is. Undos are awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, oh, I don't want to keep moving everything, and then I'm gonna just fiddle with this one last. No, I'm not even gonna fiddle with that. I'm just gonna say finish, and then let's save this thing already. This is a lot of work to put into something without saving it. So part of my process here is to give people heads up on how to do stuff. So save all the damn time. So go over here, and I can't save because of what the limitation is. I'm not paying for this, right? It's free. I'm demoing it. But that means I can only save so many files. So I'm going to come back over here, go to my editable documents, and get rid of some. So I'm going to uneditable this one, make read only. There's this 45 ACP ghost bullet. I'm going to read only that one. I haven't played with that one in a while. Some of these others I've fiddled with lately, so I'll leave them in here in my temporary like 10 file, but I could literally just shove them all into read only and then just pull them back to editable whenever I need to. But for now, I have slots, and I can save this one now as KM87, which is a German survival bayonet. There's a lot of survival knives. Some of them are even made from bayonets, and some of them are adjacent to the bayonets, but this one is a bayonet. It was given to their special operations, and it does have a hollow handle with survival shit in it. So this is literally a Rambo bayonet. So, and it was given to the communist Germans. So there you go. One of the more expensive, one of the more rare. Not the most rare and not the most expensive, but one of them. All right, so now I'm going back. So I saved it. Say thanks to Krabby Turtle for throwing in a super chat. I see that happening over here. Thanks for that. I need to figure out, I got to use OEM or OBS. If you have OBS, then not only do you have to go to the bathroom all the time, but also it makes it where it makes noises and stuff, and it makes big hooping and hollering. I don't know why StreamYard doesn't give us that. Eventually they will, I suppose. Here's the deal. I don't know if the thing is still going. Did I have the window open anymore for the poll? I don't know if people are still voting, but we're obviously doing the KM87, so I'm just killing the poll. Sorry, no need to have the. I mean, you can vote all you want, but I'm going to close this window. I am going to listen to this podcast that I already listened to once. I already paid $12 for this, so I believe I'm allowed to rebroadcast it. But if this gets copyrighted, so be it. We're not really doing this for the views. So this is the reload. If you don't listen to this one, this is Steven somebody or another from someplace, and he goes around and is a Second Amendment. And each Sunday they put out a podcast, and I already listened to this one this week. And I think it comes out Monday morning. I already listened to it this morning, and it was good. And I got a couple interesting points from it, which I don't always get. But one of them was in the beginning, and I can't remember it. So I'm going to listen to it again. There were so many good things in it that it's worth listening to twice. Let's put it that way. And then I'm going to just play it while we're going here. Like I say, I have invited people into these, but I get distracted. I have to not talk if I'm going to actually get any work done. And I only have 40 more minutes to get work done, and I should be able to finish this one. So feel free to watch, feel free to listen, feel free to chat, but it's not going to, I'm not doing this for the chat necessarily. I'm just doing it so you can all watch over my shoulder. I never finished, I guess. The other thing I get to do is record this. So now I can just go back and download this and have it as a fast forward video. Obviously there's pauses in it like this, but if I ever want to do like the how I made this or something type of video, I've got the raw footage here. So appreciate everybody joining us for the filming of the raw, the real, the authentic creation of content and educational resource. I'm illustrating things for a buyer's guide, but I'll take those illustrations and use them for lots of other projects going forward. So check out our store, check out our shirts places. We're using the illustrations all over the place. All right, so getting back into it, like I said, I got an hour here to do this. I'm going to flip the podcast on.
Right now, if you want to get weekly updates on the most important pieces of gun news in the country, we don't flood your mailbox with emails. We just send one a week. If there's breaking news, we'll send an email as well, but that's we don't treat breaking news the way some other outlets do. It's actual breaking news whenever we send you something very important things. It's not a very common thing. That's the whole idea of breaking news. But anyway, you can head over there and check out those options today, as well as if you want to support the reporting that we're doing. We are wholly member funded, so you can join today and be one of those members who will get exclusive access to hundreds of analysis pieces and news stories that you can't read anywhere else, as well as early access to this podcast and the opportunity to appear on the show as well. So this week, we're going to be talking a bit about the industry. And who better to talk about the industry, the gun industry, than the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And Larry Keane is Executive Vice President there, and he is joining the show today. How are you doing, Larry?
Very good. Thanks for having us. And I want to say my inbox thanks you.
Yes, Larry is on the email, so he knows that we don't flood the inboxes of everyone who subscribes. But can you tell people just a little bit more about the National Shooting Sports Foundation? Because I'm sure not everyone might know what you are.
NSSF is the Firearms Industry Trade Association, so our members are all of the major firearms and ammunition manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, from the big boxes, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, and such, all the way down to the independent mom and pop gun store in rural America. And we have people make all sorts of products for hunting, shooting sports, and personal protection, optics, and as we like to say, anything you can put in, on, around, or through a firearm. So people may know the SHOT Show. So NSSF owns the SHOT Show. We produce that every year. And so we're the Industry Trade Association.
Yes, that's the big show in Vegas, which I'm lucky enough to cover every year, and where you have tens of thousands of people from specifically the gun industry who show up. And so you guys obviously have a lot of knowledge about what happens in the industry, and you are advocates for the industry. You are the actual gun lobby. And this,
Yes, we are the actual gun lobby.
Yes, as much as people have called the NRA that for a long time, they're a different organization with different membership that has different goals. You guys are the ones who actually advocate for the industry itself.
Yeah, we don't have individual members. All our members are businesses, and we are the actual literal corporate gun lobby. But,
yes.
So,
Yes, that's one of the things I've always been a bit bemused by in the common discourse in media when people talk about the NRA as the gun lobby, and just sort of ignore that there actually is a literal one that operates on behalf of the industry. And until recently, in recent years, you guys have been getting a lot more heat on that front.
well, I was just going to say, we've become a target like never before by groups, particularly Giffords, for example, and others attacking NSSF, lying about positions that we have taken on issues, but we're just being, to be charitable, badly informed, misinformed, if not outright lies to advance their political agenda and raise money. But so we've sort of been discovered, if you will.
Yes, certainly becoming much higher profile. I don't know that that's what your goal has been, but this week, obviously, we've been talking a lot about an issue that directly impacts the industry, which is this adoption of a new merchant category code among major credit card issuers, Visa, MasterCard, and
No, they're not just going to complain about it. This guy is going to give you an actual insight that's different from a perspective, right? I'm not saying it's right, but it's definitely different than every other perspective I've heard. And I haven't heard all of them for sure, but I've heard consistently a different concern or fear than what we're about to hear right now.
American Express also said they're going to adopt this new code for gun retailers. And there's been a lot of concern over this. There's been a lot of pushback from NSSF and other gun rights advocacy groups, including the NRA and GOA and others. But we wanted to have you on to see sort of a bit more of a deeper insight into what this is going to do, what you guys are concerned about with this change, and how it might affect, in your minds, these retailers that you represent. So can you just give us a basic rundown of that?
It's a little involved, it's kind of wonky, but the bottom line is that Andrew Ross Sorkin, who's a business writer, New York Times, is also on CNBC, very anti-gun, came up with this idea after Park in 2018. He's been advocating, writing about it. And the proposal has gone before this international standard setting organization called ISO in the past and been rejected by the committee within ISO that works on these payment processing standards. And ISO is a massive organization. They write standards for thousands and thousands of industries, not just payment processing. But it was been rejected twice. And then we understand from discussions with the credit card processors and others that ISO asked Amalgamated Bank, which was sort of the sponsor of this proposal, to resubmit even though it had been rejected at least twice. And by way of background, Amalgamated Bank is, they call themselves a socially responsible bank. They're a quote unquote woke bank. They're also very closely aligned with the Democratic Party. They're the bank of the DNC. They're Nancy Pelosi's bank. They provide the banking services for Democrat campaigns all across the country. And as Amalgamated may suggest, these origins arise out of the unions. And the CEO is very anti-gun. And so they presented this proposal to require gun stores to have this specific merchant category code, MCC. And so on September 7th, it went before ISO again. And apparently at the committee level that dealt with it, it was again rejected, but it was appealed that same day, which is very surprising, troubling, and it raises a lot of questions. It was appealed within ISO and then approved at a higher level within ISO. We still don't know exactly what took place in Geneva, Switzerland, which is where ISO is based. We know that there are members on the Hill that want answers to these questions, and they've started asking those questions of the credit card processors already. And there have been meetings just in the last 24 hours on the Hill with some of these companies and members of Congress.
And I believe there's been a letter that was sent by 100 Republican congressmen to Visa that outlined a number of questions.
Right, so there was a large letter, 100 plus members in the House that was sent to the 3 credit card processors. There have been 2 Senate letters, I believe, that have gone already, and there will be more for sure. But so ISO approved this standard and will create a merchant category code for gun stores. Now, others that sell guns would not be captured by that code. So, for example, Walmart, because it sells so many different things as a category, as a mass merchant, and I don't know what the number is, but they have their own code. And it kind of, the code is supposed to reflect what your primary business is. And then sporting goods stores, like an Academy, for example, or Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops, something like that, would have a sporting goods category that's different, even though they sell guns and ammunition. So now gun stores, which have been captured in a miscellaneous code as a specialty retailer, will now have a standalone code. So the concern is that once that code is implemented, and the 3 credit card processors said they will implement the code, the standard, because that's the standard, but they've been very quick to say they don't want this. That they were, it had been opposed. I don't know if they remain opposed. There's questions there, but so
we'll get into that.
Right,
Well, one, I want to just start real quick with Sorkin. You brought him up earlier, and we'll get into what the credit card companies are saying in a moment here. But Sorkin was the driving force, I would say, behind this concept of using MCC codes. Or creating a special MCC code for gun retailers. Back in 2018, he did a whole story. He did stories about how some of the mass shooters had used credit cards to finance some of their gun purchases, and that this was a way. In his explaining of it, the desire seems to be to try and track patterns of gun purchasing that could indicate somebody is about to commit a mass shooting. That's if you read his pieces. And by the way, we invited him on the show, reached out to the New York Times to see if he'd come on. He declined to do that, unfortunately. I'd still be happy to talk to him. So I'm very interested in sort of as we'll get into, the logic behind a lot of this stuff and how this plan is supposed to work. But the concept here is supposed to be that you can identify some kind of pattern in gun purchasing that would create a red flag, similar to how the banks report potential fraud in the financial system to law enforcement. And so that was the idea behind creating this MCC code. Now, I guess the first question there is how. So MCC codes, to your understanding, they don't allow the banks or credit card companies to see individual items purchased, just that
Correct.
the person was shopping at a particular kind of store, right?
That's exactly right. All the code tells someone in the payment processing system is the type of store where the transaction is taking place. Nobody can see inside the basket at checkout, right? So they don't know if you're spending $2,000 duck decoys, $2,000 on guns, $2,000 on ammunition. They have no idea what you're buying. And the credit card processors have been very clear. They don't know. They don't want to know. They don't really care because it's not their job. If it's a legal transaction, they'll process it. And so it doesn't really tell Amalgamated or it doesn't do what Andrew Ross Sorkin thinks it does. But that's the concern. And in fact, after it passed, he had another piece in the New York Times, championing what ISO had done, and then said, now we got to go do the next steps, which is that an Amalgamated is working on this, to develop an algorithm to identify what they would consider to be suspicious transactions. Right. If you don't know what somebody's buying, how in the world do you know whether it's suspicious?
So that seems to be a big flaw in this idea.
So how do you solve that? What comes next is pressure to allow the banks to see what's inside the basket. So you have an invasion of privacy. And then, you're buying one of those guns. No, that's suspicious. Or no, we're just not going to process that transaction. Or you're buying too much ammunition, or you're buying too many guns, or whatever the case would be that they decide is suspicious. And so then they will file suspicious activity reports with the Treasury Department. And that opens up a can of worms. What does Treasury do with that? Well, maybe they put you on terrorist watch list. Maybe they put you on the no-fly list. You have no idea. You have no way of getting off of that list. Or it's given to law enforcement or ATF, and then all of a sudden law enforcement shows up at your door and says, let's see what you purchased. Even though you've done nothing wrong, even though you're exercising the constitutional right. So you have privacy issues, wrapped around the exercise of a fundamental constitutional right. It's very, very troubling. And sure, this push will not just stop at, okay, now we have a code. They want to see what you're buying so they can stop you from buying.
Yeah, certainly. I think even going back to those 2018 stories, he's talking about these purchases that are made across multiple different accounts at multiple different retailers and are for not just firearms, especially in the case, I believe, of the Parkland shooter. He lists in there things like, targets or magazines that he bought as being this overall amount of money that he spent on guns and, number of transactions over 2 months. And, when I look at these examples, I don't know that I see much of a pattern that's distinct from just normal gun buying by a normal person that millions of people do every year. I guess that's the core of this. Do you see any legitimacy in this idea that you could identify some sort of predictive pattern in gun purchasing that would help you catch a mass shooter or perhaps a gun trafficker. That's been the other.
I don't
example.
believe that you can, or that it would be effective. One, keep in mind, retailers who are making the sale, if they think something is suspicious, they can, as they do all the time, deny the sale and contact ATF and local law enforcement. That happens every day in this country, right? So the retailer's in a better position to make a judgment on that than some algorithm or somebody sitting at a computer terminal in some center in India or something, then decide whether it's suspicious or not. I don't know how you would decide that, particularly when you don't know what even a person is purchasing. Or if somebody goes shooting every weekend, they buy ammunition every weekend. That's very suspicious. I mean, it's just fraught with opportunities for abuse. And the credit card processors, particularly since ISO has adopted this, have sent letters to Senator Warren and others that have supported this to say, we will adopt the code because that's the standard. But this changes nothing. We don't see inside the basket. We don't want to see inside the basket. It's not our job. Also, credit card companies, banks already have a legal obligation to report to Treasury, to file a suspicious activity report if they see any activity that is suspicious. But this is in the context of fraud. Like, Stephen's credit card, is always used in a certain geographic region because that's where he lives. And all of a sudden, there's a transaction with this card in India. Well, that gives you something to say, wait a second, what's going on here? Stephen never goes to India, and that happens when people, if you're traveling, you might get a call from the credit card company saying, is this you? And that sort of thing. But just to look at purchases, $1 amount, and say, well, this person bought something from a gun store, there must be something nefarious here. It's going to result in, and then what's going to happen? Law enforcement's going to get inundated with these suspicious activity reports. What are they going to do? Start knocking on the door or just ignore it? They don't see how it works. I don't think they truly understand how the process actually works.
I mean, it does strike me as something of an idea that, something of a New York Times idea, if that makes sense.
It's happening.
Something where they just don't have an understanding of how people actually buy guns in real life, and so they see, this mass shooter bought, a couple $1,000s worth of guns in 2 months, and that's shocking to them because they have this. They don't understand that a lot of people buy a couple $1,000s worth of guns in every couple of months. Like, it's not an uncommon thing to do. It's sort of this classic media misunderstanding when they're describing arsenals, right? And it's a couple hundred rounds of ammunition and like 5 guns. That is not an uncommon thing for just normal people to have.
And I will tell you, in having conversations with the credit card processors, several of them have indicated to us that they don't believe that Andrew Sorkin or the politicians advocating for this understand how the system works, and that this is not going to be what they think unless it goes to these next steps where they can see inside the basket or start denying transactions, and the pressure will be applied to the issuing banks to start denying transactions.
Yeah, that was the other, suggestion that Sorkin had in one of his pieces, that you could use MCC codes. I think for Americans outside of like the jargon of the financial industry, but the most common use of an MCC code is on things like rewards credit cards, right? When you buy, gas on your special credit card or a flight, you get money back for that. Well, that's the result of MCC codes, I believe, is how that works.
And so
that gives people a context for what these actually do.
So the other thing, Sorkin's more recent piece said, okay, now mass, sporting goods stores that also sell guns, they have to have a separate counter, and they have to apply the code to transactions at that counter. And they analogize to, like, you go to CVS and you got to pay for your prescription drugs at the pharmacy counter, but you can also buy anything else you want to buy in the store. You can ring up at that cash register. So that doesn't tell you anything. Yeah,
that was the other, I think, significant shortcoming of this concept. Even if you did believe that you could identify some sort of suspicious buying pattern with an MCC code at gun retailers, if it's not applied to Cabela's and Bass Pro, and these bigger stores where a lot of guns are sold. Like, certainly Smith & Wesson's earnings numbers, which actually we'll get into a little bit later, but it's a separate story, but they indicate that they sell, I think, a majority of their guns through large retailers. And so if you're not capturing those, like, it wouldn't trip up this whole concept to begin with.
Walmart's the largest firearms dealer in the country, right? Collectively, all their stores combined. So, how are you going to do this? You won't know. And so now, again, you have to see inside the basket, right? Which is what they want. Yeah. And then they're going to say, you can't do a transaction with somebody buying a modern sporting rifle or a magazine of that size or that much ammunition.
Right. And, obviously this is part of a larger fight to try and restrict access to financing by gun companies. And now it's moved on to gun buyers in this instance, whereas before it was like banks refusing to work with Smith & Wesson or Ruger or other gun companies if they didn't stop making certain guns like the AR-15. Before that, it was Operation Choke Point, which involved banking for members of the industry, and members of other disfavored industries like payday loans. But now this is moving on to sort of average Americans, people who buy guns now. In theory, if they obviously, again, we're at the first step on this path that they want to go down, and it certainly seems like the credit card processors are not interested in going any further than this. But the end goal would be, the end result would be, tracking of everyone who buys guns in America.
Right, so you could have a registry of gun owners maintained by private corporations.
Yeah, and so let me get your reaction to.
It's the same way the government database would be concerned.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's if you got all the way down the line of these changes they want, which have not happened, to be very clear. They got the MCC changes. What has happened? They need a lot more, the transaction level visibility than reporting to police and law enforcement and government. There's a lot more that have to happen to get to that point. But it does seem to be the ultimate endpoint. If you read Sorkin's work, that's what they want. They want surveillance of all gun sales in the United States so they can sort of pre-crime track it to try and flag potentially suspicious purchases. But let me get Visa's quote here. They published a blog, and they said, I quote, and this is in line with things they've said before and what MasterCard has said in public before as well, asking private companies to decide what legal products or services can or cannot be bought and from what store sets a dangerous precedent. Further, it will be an invasion of consumers' privacy for banks and payment networks to know each of our most personal purchasing habits. Visa is firmly against this. They also said, quote, when we process a transaction, we have no visibility into what items the consumer is purchasing. This is true irrespective of which MCC merchant applies. And finally, I think most importantly, they say, quote, our network does not allow any financial institution member to deny transactions for the purchase of legal goods or services based on which MCC they fall under. Visa provides our services to everyone, everywhere, so long as they are used for legal purchases. We believe that is the appropriate standard. And so, I mean, to be fair to Visa, they do seem to be just whole concept that sort of Elizabeth Warren and people like Letitia James and New York AG have brought up for this change.
My discussions with the processors is they're not happy they've been dragged into this. It's a little unclear did they really fight the establishment of this standard, the code? That remains to be seen. But even the quote you read from Visa, so Acme Bank couldn't deny all transactions coming from a gun store into the code, but if they get access to what's in the basket, that statement would not preclude them from saying, well, we'll process other gun store transactions, but not ones where they're buying that.
Mm-hmm. So Visa says they don't want that.
They don't want
that level.
Right? Not, they also said they didn't want the code, but here we are.
Right. Yeah, and I get the other thing I'll say is these are pretty strong statements from Visa to their credit. But we talked to them. We reached out to them. I spoke with very briefly with one of their spokespeople, and they just would not answer any questions beyond what was in the blog post. And if their position is that they don't intend to use this MCC code the way that the people who pushed for the change are advocating, then it's still unclear to me why they're adopting it at all.
Well, and they're
So
not
they haven't
obligated, right? It's not a legal requirement that they adopt the code. It's a voluntary industry standard.
Right.
The three of them decided we're not going down this path, but they have all said immediately after it was adopted, within 24 hours, that they would adopt and implement the standard because that's the standard for their industry. So they've sort of been dragged into this by the gun control community, and so now they're trying to figure out, it seems to me, how to navigate it. I mean, they are talking to the Hill. The Hill is asking them pointed questions, and I will tell you, we are aware, because we're getting questions from state legislators, attorneys general, what's going on. They're going to be engaging on the issue as well.
So what is the industry doing to prepare for this MCC implementation, if anything? What can what are you telling your retailers?
We're working to educate members of the industry. What we're seeing already, we've heard this and we've seen some stories about it. Retailers are putting ATM machines in their store. So you see comments in social media, et cetera, saying, well, we'll just simply pay with cash, right? So, and if you're a bad guy, right, like you're illegal firearms trafficker, we'll just pay, you just pay cash and avoid any, so I don't, you'll sidestep it. But then it brings up, other unintended consequences. Now you have gun stores with a lot of cash. If you got a lot of cash, you become a target for robberies, right? So,
well, I would also wonder too, because obviously, certainly, I've heard that comment a lot on social media. Well, just buy guns with cash from now on, and that would prevent you from the purchase from showing up in this new MCC code. But also that would seem to be a pretty severe blow to the industry. If people feel they can't buy guns with their credit or debit, this would also affect debit purchases. Then that's that's bad. It's not a good thing for the industry, I would imagine.
No, I mean, we wouldn't want to see that because it should be treated like every other industry, to access and use the payment process. I suspect we'll see legislation introduced in Congress on this, maybe not till the next Congress. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see hearings on this issue, in the next Congress, to sort of get to the bottom of what happened and why this was adopted. And as I mentioned earlier, this was a very troubling ISO process where they were re-invited after being rejected twice. Why? Who did that? And how did it get appealed and approved the same day? That's very suspect to me. That just raises a lot of red flags for me about the process. So do you have any concerns about basically blue states, New York and California adopting policies that require, if somebody spends X amount of dollars at this MCC code, that transaction will have to be reported to local law enforcement? Something like that could happen on the opposite side. I could see very red states saying you're not allowed to use that code and process a transaction in this state. And if you do, it's a fine. So this has just become another battle overall Second Amendment fight, it seems. So,
and it seems like it could go broader than that too. I mean, there's no MCC code for abortion clinics right now. I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes another hot button issue here soon.
I think you can almost guarantee things like that will occur. It's just sort of a natural, okay, well, you did that to us, we'll do that to you as well. Two can play that game. So, and we frankly have already heard that from some state legislators saying, well, the copper bill will require, reporting for, abortion services, some other hot button issue, or name the product. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Yeah, I guess that's the thing about this MCC code is like if it had happened, if this change had happened without the obvious political intentions behind it, it might not have been as controversial because there's MCC codes for all sorts of industries, but
right.
But because of that, it changes everything about it and brings us into like the culture war tit for tat as well as. And it ultimately, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it could be the basic idea holds water. How this could even be useful.
I don't see how it works, how it could be useful. As you mentioned, people advocating for this or gun control advocates, this is not something originating, from the payment processing system saying, hey, we can improve our system. They're not asking for this. In fact, they say they were opposed and don't want it. And that, you read the statement that Visa, MasterCard just put out a very similar statement. So is American Express. We just saw it just today, responding to the letter from Senator Warren and others saying this changes nothing. We don't see inside the basket. We don't want to see inside the basket. Our system is available so long as the transaction is legal. And, buying firearms from a licensed dealer is legal. And it's not just legal, it's the exercise of a constitutional right.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of one of the other ironic things about all this is that it only impacts sales that are done by licensed dealers because those are the ones accepting credit and debit cards. And so you already have to go through a background check to accomplish that.
Right.
And if you buy more more than one gun in a certain period, then that gets reported to the ATF. There's already a lot of things done in this front. But
and
anyway,
the retailer at the counter, right, is in the best position to kind of say, well, this doesn't feel right. I'm not comfortable with this, and I'm not going to go through with the sale, which happens every day in this country.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to move with the time we got left to talk about the state of the industry right now, because obviously we just came off of 2 years of the best sales numbers in history, some incredible financial reports from the two publicly traded companies, Ruger and Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wesson had the first $1 billion revenue year of any gun company in history. Now we're seeing that those numbers slow down, right? Come back to earth. Smith & Wesson posted a 69% drop off in sales in their first quarter this year, which is their first quarter it's a financial quarter, so it ended in July. It's not calendar, but either way, your Ruger had their sales decline in a similar fashion, not quite as steep, but these companies are seeing slowdowns. You're also seeing this in the NICS checks numbers, which you guys do an analysis of every month, where we're now back towards the third best month each month.
Right.
And you're seeing this summer season actually be the slow season again, because normally it is in most years, but the pandemic, the rioting, all the stuff that happened in politics, the election drove so much activity. What is your forecast now? What is your outlook on where the industry is at?
So obviously, as you mentioned, 20 and 21 were off the charts, highest sales ever in the history of the industry. And so at some point that was not sustainable forever. So we're seeing a return to more normal, quote unquote, from the peak. But so 22 will be the third best year in the history of the industry. That's very clear from the NICS data, as you mentioned. Every month has been like the third best month ever, behind 20 and 21. So it's going to be the third best year, which is not a bad thing, right? So it's still a phenomenal year for the industry, just not the same as 20 and 21. But again, that was not sustainable forever. And we've seen these spikes in demand in the past. And they usually come either with a presidential election or as a result of some political event or tragedy that leads to heated discussion about gun control and banning products.
Mm-hmm.
What we see, if you look at the NICS data over many years, you see the spike, and you see when it comes off of the spike, the valley floor is higher before the surge. And we're seeing that here, right? We're settling at the third best year, but it's still way ahead of where we were in 18, 19, et cetera. People refer to the Trump's, right?
Right.
And so, the Trump slump was still well ahead of where things were in the couple of years before that. So that's a phenomenon we see over time. That will repeat itself, I believe. Sales are moderating. Ammunition sales, you're starting to see a product on the shelf a little more regularly. The demand is still very high overall. We have a lot of gun buyers in the last 2 years, and many of them are engaging in shooting sports and hunting, and so they're consuming ammunition. It's like many kind of sports, you buy golf clubs, and then you say, "Oh, I need a better driver, I need a different wedge or a putter," so then you would buy other products. Skiing, the same thing. Well, I need ski for powder snow, I need ice skis, rock skis, and I need different skis for ski moguls than road trails, that sort of thing. So we'll see that. It will moderate. Now we'll see what happens in the midterms. I think if both chambers flip, and then obviously the Democrats cannot advance gun control in Congress and put it on President Obama or Biden's desk. So I think that will cause more moderation. As you know, when there's threats to bans, people react and try to purchase what they perceive will be banned before that happens.
Yeah.
So I think both chambers flip, and I think it's very clear the House will flip. It's a question of how much of the majority Republicans will have. The Senate is more of a toss-up, but if it flips, by like one seat, right, then changes control, and whoever's the majority sets the agenda. So it will moderate, and then I think as you approach 24, depending on the politics, depending on rhetoric leading into the 24 presidential election, sales are likely to pick up again leading to that election. That's just sort of a cycle we see. But no question, we're off of the peaks, but the valley floor is higher.
Right. Speaking of these sales spikes in response to legislation effectively moving forward, obviously we had the Sullivan's ban pass the House for the first time in 30 years since the last one expired. But it doesn't seem like we've experienced a big rush in purchases of the effective guns, AR-15s, AK-47s, they're what you guys call modern sporting rifles. I've talked to a couple of retailers in the Northern Virginia area here, and just I go to gun stores on a regular basis and don't notice any empty shelves in terms of AR-15s. And I've talked to Brandon Wexler of Wex Gunworks down in Florida, who's experienced the same thing, where there hasn't really been a big jump in sales. Obviously, that's not. I'm still trying to talk to some more retailers throughout the country just to get a better idea. But have you noticed any increased demand for ARs in the wake of that Sullivan's ban? And if not, why not?
We have not. We haven't heard reports from manufacturers or retailers telling us, wow, there's a surge that has occurred. And I think the reason for that is because it's very clear the bill that just barely passed the House is not going anywhere in the Senate. It doesn't have anywhere near 60 votes it would need to move. There are many Democrats that would not vote for this, the ban on modern sporting rifles. I think, I don't even believe it would get 50 votes, let alone anywhere approaching 60. So I think there is not political fear, despite the rhetoric coming from Schumer, Biden, Pelosi. The votes are not there. I don't even think it has anywhere near 50 votes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. But I guess, do you think gun buyers have become a bit more savvy on, which legislation is likely to pass and which is not? Because obviously in the past, we've seen spikes around legislation that ultimately didn't go anywhere.
I think maybe that's true. I'm not really sure. We really haven't done any kind of polling to sort of get a view on that. But I think we've certainly tried to explain to people the votes aren't there in the Senate. Many political stories about it have also made that point that it's very unlikely to be anywhere in the Senate. And interestingly, in the House, more Democrats voted against it than Republicans voted for it. Only 2 Republicans voted for it. Those are the 2 votes necessary to get it over to pass it. But there were at least 7 Democrats who voted no, which is interesting. So I don't think it's moving. Maybe the buyers sort of realizing that for the press. Hard to say for sure. The other factor I would say is the Bruen decision, I think, has probably had an impact. That now for the first time, people say, okay, there's clearly no history to banning rifles of any kind. And I believe the Supreme Court's articulation of the proper test of Bruen, I think we're going to see bans that are in place now at the state level fall and be struck down. The same for magazine capacity restrictions. So that decision, really is a game changer for the future of gun control legislation. It's going to be for the gun control organizations and advocates to have bans on hardware and things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes you kind of wonder if that sort of legislation-induced demand of people worrying about new bans is going to go away, and after this, maybe people won't be as concerned about it anymore, and they're not going to rush out to buy.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like slow and steady wins the race, right? It's very hard for the industry to respond to these sudden, unpredictable spikes in demand, right? You can't just you don't carry a bunch of inventory sitting there that maybe someday in the future you don't know when there might be demand, the spike demand, right? So you try to respond, lean manufacturing, manufacturing just in time. So when there is these huge surges, you can't produce the product overnight. It takes a little while to get it in the distribution channels and on the retailer's shelf. To be purchased. So, and because of that, lack of supply in response to the spike in demand, that of course is what causes prices to go up. Basic economics. But so back in like '94, when the first ban went in place, there was a surge in demand. A lot of companies jumped in and started making the product, and then when the ban went in place, it all collapsed, and a lot of people went out of business as a result of that. So, honestly, slow and steady wins the race. That's much more, that's a better environment for you to plan and operate your business. It's more predictable, things like that. So, I think, slow and steady wins the race.
Interesting. All right. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us about, what's going on in the industry and talk about some of these issues that we've been covering here at the Reload. So, if people want to learn more about NSSF or read more what you write, because you obviously you also are out there writing op-eds a lot of the time, where can they go and do that?
Just www.nssf.org, National Shooting Sports Foundation.org.
You guys also have a great resource to find ranges too.
Yes, where to shoot, where to hunt is all accessible off the website. So you want to find someplace you can punch in your zip code and find the range, or if you want to go hunting, the same thing. So we try to have lots of firearm safety education, information, resources on our website, information for retailers, compliance training, ATF, Don't Lie, Operation Support Store, Project Child Safe, obviously, and things like that. So a lot of information on our website, not just for the industry.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that I think probably the listeners of this podcast would be interested in checking out. So people should head over there when they get a chance. All right. Well, thank you so much. We'll have to have you on again in the near future.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks.
All right. It's time for the news update. We've got contributing writer Jake Fogelman here with me. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing fine, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing all right. There's a new Blackpink album, so I've got the shirt on. I like classic rock and alt rock, and then one K-pop band, which is this one. So fairly eclectic taste, I guess sometimes, but it's a good album, so you should listen to it. But more importantly, I've got a news story from you about a very well-known person in the gun rights community, Dick Heller. What is he up to right now?
That's right. Dick Heller is back in the news for more gun-related litigation in the District of Columbia. He just had some success once again getting the district to repeal a gun law that he was challenging in court. This time it's sort of a peculiar law that I don't think a lot of people outside of DC are kind of aware of. But since the mid-'70s, DC has had a restriction on the amount of ammunition people can carry if they're licensed to carry in the district. So this isn't a magazine capacity restriction. They have one of those as well. But this specifically refers to the amount of ammunition you can carry on your person when you're out and about. So their previous rule was it could only be twice the amount of the capacity of the particular gun that you're carrying. So say you have a 6-shot revolver that you're carrying, that means you can only have 12 rounds of ammunition on your person. And the maximum cap is 20 because they have a 10-round magazine limit. So they assume that you can't carry more than 20 rounds of ammunition.
And it's unique to every individual person's gun, right? It's one of the real odd things about it, because the same person could have two different limits based on whatever gun they happen to be carrying.
Right.
But yeah, so Heller challenged that, right?
That's right. Yeah. Very shortly after the Bruin decision got handed down in June, he filed a suit against DC, and that just 2 days before they were set to file their reply brief to his complaint, basically defending their law against his request for an injunction, they just decided on an emergency basis to outright repeal that law, just to avoid the whole thing. So he was successful once again in getting them to repeal a gun law.
Yeah, and for those who don't know who Dick Heller is, he was the individual plaintiff in DC versus Heller, which was the first time that the Supreme Court established the Second Amendment protects an individual right to own guns, to at least keep guns inside your home. He was challenging at the time DC's total ban on the ownership of handguns, even inside your own house. So he's very important in Second Amendment litigation for that reason. And he's also pretty unique. And you talked to him, so you got some idea of this. He's a very passionate, he's kind of a gadfly, right? Which is a little different than what you find with a lot of individual plaintiffs in federal gun cases, because usually the way it works is, a gun rights group wants to challenge this law. They think they have a good shot at overturning it. And so they go out and recruit plaintiffs who are affected by it. And these people are, people who want to see the law overturned because it adversely affects them personally. But, and you need individual plaintiffs in often cases to have standing so you can actually sue. Usually it can't just be the gun rights group on its own. They have to show there are people affected by this individually. But in most cases, they're recruited by these groups. They go out and try to find somebody who's willing to sign on to a lawsuit. There are occasions, and Heller is probably the most well-known occasion of this, and at least in the gun sphere, where you have a plaintiff who initiates a case on their own, who's sort of more of an activist litigant. Like they're involved from the very beginning. They're the ones who want to bring the suit and might even face either opposition. I think Heller faced quite a bit of opposition from the gun groups to filing his first case. Some people didn't think that was going to succeed, but he went forward. Alan Gurr was the lawyer who won that case. And, you know, you also have occasions where perhaps a litigant who's not a plaintiff who's not in an area that's very popular for gun suits. So Hawaii in particular, and I'm thinking of George Young, who was the plaintiff in Young v. Hawaii, obviously. But that case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court and was granted, vacated, and remanded in the wake of Bruin. But it was the open carry case against Hawaii, and that was filed by Young on a pro se basis initially, which means without a lawyer. And he had tried to file against this law a couple of times and was having at least what Alan Beck, who ended up being his lawyer, felt was he was being treated unfairly by the court system. And so Beck wanted to help him just to be able to make sure he had everything in line to get this case an actual hearing in front of a judge, not necessarily expecting it to turn into a major gun rights case. But they're Young and Heller are relatively uncommon types of plaintiffs in these cases, and Heller especially, because not only did he do the first Heller case, which turned into a landmark case, he's done I don't know, it's 7 or 8. It's hard to keep track at this point because he's just constantly filing these cases, and a lot of them he's winning, and even the ones where he loses, I believe it was Heller 2 is what it's called. That was the case against DC's assault weapons ban years ago, where Kavanaugh, who's currently a Supreme Court justice, was the dissenting vote in that decision on the DC circuit, and that was an extremely important dissent in the realm of gun litigation, because that was the first one to talk about this history and tradition standard, text, history, tradition. I think they kind of shortened it to text and tradition in Bruin, but that standard was really first articulated in Heller 2. It might have been Heller 3, don't hold me to the number.
It was Heller 2.
But yeah, I thought that's good. I thought that's what it was. But anyway, even when he loses, oftentimes these cases have significant impact on gun litigation moving forward. And so, as of late, he hasn't been losing, right? There was another recent case that you wrote about a little while back that involved Heller too, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the strategy seems to be for the last couple of Heller suits where he's gone after the district, rather than actually wait for a court ruling saying, this law is unconstitutional, we're going to put an injunction on the law, blah, blah, blah. It seems the district's new strategy is just to say, kind of read the tea leaves, see that they're probably going to lose, and then they just get in front of it and they repeal the law before any judgment can be issued against it. So the case you're referring to, we covered last year. Heller went after their so-called ghost gun ban, which again was another really peculiar law in the way it was written. It was very, very expansive to the point where there was actual law enforcement critics of the law who said, hey, this possibly criminalizes our Glocks, because they went after the whole polymer. It can't be some percentage plastic, because they were worried that metal detectors wouldn't be able to detect it. It's kind of the classic hysteria that we've seen since the advent of polymer framed striker fired guns. This has come up from time to time, but essentially that's how broad their law was written in an attempt to go after ghost guns. And the attorney general actually stepped in that case and said, yeah, we're probably going to lose, so I want the city council to amend this law just to get in front of a judgment. So that's basically the same thing that happened here in this ammunition ban case, where 2 days before they were expected to submit a brief defending the legality of this law under the new Second Amendment standard, they just said, to heck with it, just on an emergency basis, we're just going to repeal it. And so that's the new tact they appear to be taking.
Yeah, and it's really not that it's not super new for DC because they've been doing this not just in Heller cases as well, but also in a number of major gun litigation events where, for instance, Ren v. DC, which is the case where the city's gun carry law was struck down. They had a total ban on concealed carry that got struck down, and open carry, so all forms of legal gun carry. That was struck down. Then they passed what was basically the same law as what New York and Maryland and California had, which was a May issue law that basically still allowed them to subjectively deny permits to people who applied. And so they did that, and they denied almost all of them, right? And so they lost on that law as well. They had their May issue law struck down a couple years before Bruin was handed down, obviously this year. And so they had the choice to appeal to the Supreme Court, but instead they decided not to. And the Attorney General, Racine, explicitly said the decision was made so as not to risk setting a nationwide precedent. And it seems like that's why they're caving on a lot of these things. And that's a totally different strategy than what we've seen from California and New York. In California and New York, in reaction to Bruin, instead of playing it safe or trying to mitigate cases against them, trying to give on smaller areas of concern so they don't have to litigate these things all the way to the Supreme Court, they're doubling down on these kinds of laws, and frankly, their strategy seems very likely to produce more Bruins, whereas DC is trying to avoid that. Is what the tactic seems to be. Now, this case, it's a really weird law that it probably has never actually been enforced in any meaningful way, I would guess, because it's like very hard to imagine a scenario where somebody is arrested over this, but and so maybe DC just decided it's not worth fighting over at all because it's kind of a dumb, but it's with this very random restriction. But I really feel like at this point they should probably just consult with Heller before they pass these regulations, or like talk to him about what he plans to challenge next, so they can address it before spending a bunch of money in court to ultimately lose anyway at the pace that they're going. So it's interesting to see Heller just continue this winning streak without even much resistance from DC anymore. Like they didn't even file much more realistic.
A defense brief this time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they just seem much more realistic about the odds of them winning on these novel restrictions that are not historically grounded, right? Especially in the wake of Bruin. I mean, DC was being fairly cautious about fighting these cases up the chain in the federal courts from, probably it was like 2018, I believe, was Ren. And so it's been a strategy that's kept them from having precedents, created through their cases at the Supreme Court. So it's working in that sense for sure. And I think it's more savvy, I guess, litigation strategy than what New York and California are doing, which is just blatantly violate what's in Bruin, and I don't know, hope for the best.
I was going to say it's savvy on their part, but New York and California may yet force their hand, depending on how far those cases work their way up.
Right. So if it doesn't really work if half the gun control movement is taking a cautious approach, trying to minimize the rulings that are potentially going to be handed down against them and create precedents across the country. And the other half is just doing a Leroy Jenkins strategy of just YOLOing everything.
Great reference.
Doubling down on all the stuff they said. The Supreme Court, in a lot of cases, explicitly noted is not constitutional.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll see how it works out. It's probably the courts aren't lightning quick in their reaction to these things oftentimes. So California and New York haven't had a major loss in court yet. It's only been a couple months since Bruin, and they've only just, some of these laws haven't even passed yet. Obviously, we talked about the California carry restrictions that didn't get through the first go round that mirror New York's, but we'll probably get through by the end of this year when they start session again. But anyway, we'll keep on top of all that stuff, and we'll most certainly keep on top of what Heller is doing, because it seems to be fairly predictive of how DC gun laws are going to turn out, because he's been extremely successful.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, if he comes back in court again, I'm sure we'll see another law get struck down on the streak that he's on. So stay tuned at the Reload.
Yep, absolutely. You can do that by heading over to our website and picking up a membership today if you want to support the kind of work that we're doing. If you like this sober, serious brand of journalism that honestly is hard to find anywhere else, informed, but also, not a bunch of hot takes, I guess, is the way I would put what we do here, right? We know what we're talking about, and we're not going to try and sensationalize it to, get a bunch of clicks. That's not what we're after. We're after trying to inform people as best we can with knowledgeable analysis and original reporting, breaking stories that you won't find anywhere else. I think we were the first ones to cover this Heller.
I think so too, yeah.
Certainly with comment from him. But that's often the case that you'll find over at the Reload. So if you want to see that continue, if you want exclusive access to hundreds of pieces that you can't find anywhere else that are member exclusive, you should buy a membership today. Support what we're doing. That's how we continue to do this. We have 100% revenue coming from our members and their subscriptions. So head over, check it out today. You'll get the podcast daily, and you get a chance to be on the show too. We like to do those member segments fairly frequently. So head on over there, and we'll see you again real soon.
Watching England. Started watching England at the end there. Why the hell won't it let me wiggle now? So it's not letting me wiggle anymore the way I want to wiggle. I want to move it over, and it won't let me. There it goes. Oh, see, that's the thing. I'm pretty sure they just engineer some of this crap in here so that when drafts people and engineer get paid the big bucks to fart around with this stuff, whenever they feel like it, they can just be like, oh, my software's fighting me. Took me a long time. It's a big scam. So let's see. We're going to drag this little guy back this way. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Maybe like that. And then make it a new body. Everybody likes a new body. And then go to this one. I've got to turn off the bodies for this. Grab this one. Right there. That one. And then flip the bodies back on. Do another deal. Oh, I guess I should have said okay before. Flip the bodies back off. Flip the sketch back on. All the sketches. And then grab that guy. And put the bodies back on. And extrude. And this time we're cutting. We'll just go ahead and make it a symmetrical just in case. And okay. And now we've got the little dingle down there. It's not perfect because we have these little goofy thingies here. So let's see a couple of different ways to get rid of them. One is probably just to click this and delete. I think I just did. And then click that and delete. Nope, that didn't do it. Nope, they're still there. So we're going to go to the, get rid of the bodies. Go to the sketch. Get like this. Basically get in here and edit this guy. Like you can do whatever it wants, but like up here. Whoa, just go right over here. Calm down. Most of this is going to all disappear anyway, but now, once it catches up with everything, flip the bodies back on, and hopefully we got the thing up far enough that they don't show up in the thing, and they don't, so good to go. All right, so let's see what we got going on. It looks like we missed an extrude here somehow. Something happened to this extrude. Missing profiles. Okay. Oh, something killed our profile down here. Oh, it moved. All right, so undo, undo, undo. So it didn't actually move those things, it moved the whole freaking part. So now we're going to highlight them again. Edit. Oh, I'm already editing, so go down here. Okay, so now we're doing this. We're going to highlight both of those, and then we're going to say move. And now we're going to just move them up a bit, maybe. Oh, didn't work. So all right, cancel, finish. So I'm going to go back to this. It should be edit. And now I should be able to go in here and do whatever I want to these little guys, including move them. Why is it letting me move them? Move. Am I moving it now? I don't think I moved it at all. Stupid. It'll let me do garbage like that. What's up with that? Makes no sense. Okay, so it's obviously broken, so we're gonna come out of it. Go make sure the body is still okay, except for those two errors. could just come down here and grab that whole thing and delete. Does that work? No. Move. All right, so it was being stubborn. I moved it up in there a different way, and mission accomplished. Now it's done. So I can't get these things to bevel more, so I'm not sure what's up with that. Let's see if I can't play with this a little bit. Maybe not. Doesn't look like it. All right. Can't see anywhere else where I might want to fill it. I guess maybe over here. I don't think that's doing anything. Can't tell. Cancel. We try putting a radius up here. It's probably not going to like it because it's a goofy shape, but we're going to try anyway. Nope. Put a 0 in front of it. It took that, so 0.8. Nope. How about 0.6? Took a 0.6. We're giving them 0.6. We'll take it. All right, what else can we put a radius on? Oh, maybe on this. This would be neat. Right there. Can we get 0.06 on that? No, that was too much to ask. 0.02. 0.2. Nope. Sometimes you can't tell where these things scroll around to. That's the problem. All right, well, so we're going to stick with that, and we're going to call that a KM87, and we're going to say save. Let's see. So before I save it into a file, I'm going to go back and create all of these extrusions. So that extrusion and then this extrusion is going to be join. Okay, so now those are one piece of stuff. Next extrusion was this one. And guess what? Join. Okay. Next one. Those little things. So we're going to say to them, join. Okay. And then we go on to the next thing, which is the body. And what we tell it is, eventually, join. So these are all just becoming one larger and larger and larger piece. Tell that pin to join. It already did, so I don't have to tell it that. Next pin. Next piece, maybe. Next piece here. It's already joined. This piece here is the last piece pretty much. Joined. I wonder if that has some effect on the bevels. I never thought about having effect on the bevels. Join. I said join, and I said okay. So now it said okay. Something's unhappy. The move is unhappy now because you can't move something that's been created, I guess. So I'll delete the move. Delete. And now those pieces will still be there. What doesn't it like about it? Well, what the hell? Fillet. So, I don't know what it's complaining about. If I knew how to work the software, I might know. So it doesn't like this fillet, I guess. So I'll just delete it and see what happens. Now it'll shut up. Be a good file. I don't know. So let's remove the sketches. Quit looking at them. Let's quit looking at the canvas. And now let's just look at this Bayonet. This is the way it looks, so can't help that it's goofy looking. It isn't perfect, but guess what? I'm just printing it. I'm not trying to save nothing. But what I don't like is that still I don't like the beginning. So I'm going to give one more chance to kill the body. Go back to sketches. Open up all those sketches and get into this particular sketch right here. Edit the sketch to where I want. How come it won't let me move those fucking pieces? Press pull. Oh, what press pull does, so quit doing it. All I'm wanting to do is move this and maybe that. So modify, move, and I just want to move it up a little bit. Okay to the move, finish sketch. Did it move? No. So what's up with that? If I wanted to move this thing, I can move this thing all day and night. It makes no sense. I can move that just by clicking it. How come I can't move this one? Sketch point. Okay. Is it locked or something? What the hell? We can move this point. Yeah, all I want. Move it all over the place. All right, I'm about to not care anymore, so that's how you have to do it. Been working on this for 39 minutes longer than I wanted, so that's going to end the end of it. It's going to have a glitch in it. We're going to name Nancy or blame Nancy Pelosi for the glitch. It's her fault. She wasn't so horrible. I could have probably spent more time concentrating on how to work this software, but that's what we're going to get. So we're going to get that. I'm going to save it again, and now we've saved it a bunch of times. Now we're going to, what's it called? Turn it into a file that I can shove off of here into a different whole nother file, cram it into a different place. So KM87 version 6. I've saved this thing 6 times. So now it's going to take some time to download. And then I don't even know if my audio is working, but I'll be shoving this into the other software and then I'll be printing it. I meant to spend an hour and I spent an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm going to be shutting this down. Thanks everybody for listening. I wanted to listen to some of that reload twice because he made a bunch of interesting points that weren't just yelling about the situation with the credit cards, but instead offering some insight to the way that the industry perceives it, and kind of, I guess, his perception of its importance in the big picture. So with that, there's also some interesting stuff in there about industry and the way that they count, and the way that NSSF feels about some future, I guess, projections, or how they see the future going down. Anyway, thanks again for showing up. Sneak these things in every once in a while. Like this time, it took an extra hour, but I'll sneak that back from something else somewhere, and we'll keep working on some of these projects. Thanks to our patrons, people that make it possible for us to do the kind of things we do. They subscribe to our projects. You can subscribe to it too. Our goal is to have 300. It'd be great to have 3,000. Our goal is to get 300 Patreons so that we can start doing the Daily Gun Show overnight, long format each night, and cover a lot more topics. Anyway, with that, check it out, and we'll throw a commercial up here for our store. You can buy stuff over there. That'd be awesome. And we'll be back to pick you up, I guess, in about an hour. Oh, shit, no, less than that. Be back to pick you up later.
GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.
Tonight's episode, Triangle of Terror.
The guys and gals at gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice once a month, and carry every day.
Thank you for watching GunWebsites.com.